Hey guys, tonight we're going to creep into the shadows of history, where things get a little spooky and a whole lot absurd. The origins of Halloween traditions. Forget about the pumpkin spice lattes and cute costumes. I mean the real Halloween. Bone-chilling ghost stories, questionable candy choices, and a time when ghosts had better PR than most politicians. So, before you settle in under a spooky blanket, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment letting me know your favourite Halloween candy, or whether you've ever stepped on a Lego in the dark, because that's horror in its most relatable form. Now, dim those lights, maybe light a candle, preferably not one that's 20 years old, and get comfortable. Let's take a breath. Have you ever wondered why we do the things we do on Halloween? Why do we decorate with skeletons instead of garden gnomes? When did adults start dressing like they're at a frat party? And do they even know how to spell boo? What's with the obsession with candy corn? Is it food or a fruit-flavoured lump of regret? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Ireland, a land of fairies, phantoms, and festivals. The year is 400 AD. You've got a cloak made of sheep wool, a suspiciously large cauldron, and plans to figure out how to scare the pants off some unsuspecting spirits. Best of luck. Samhain wasn't just an Irish holiday. It was like an ancient razor where the line between the living and the dead got blurred. Picture it. Bonfires blazing, villagers dressed up in animal skins, and everything smelling a bit like burnt sheep. People believed that on this night ghosts were crashing the party, so a few practical jokers decided to dress up, hoping to scare the spirits away. But honestly, was anyone ever scared of a guy in a deer costume? It's hard to imagine that a fuzzy, slightly awkward man-butt could send chills down anyone's spine. But you know, ancient traditions are peculiar. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the villagers gathered around bonfires reminiscent of that old campfire story your uncle tells. That one you hear at every family get-together until you want to bury him in an unmarked plot in the backyard. But instead of the mysterious hitchhiker, it was all about uninvited spectral guests. And trust me, those were the ghosts that really made the rounds. You'd think having your cousin Gerald dress up as a ghost would be scary, but given that he always tripped over his own feet at the end of the night during family functions, imagine what it was like for the actual ghost trying to mingle. Back in ancient times, Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the start of winter. For the Celts, it symbolised a transition, much like when you realise halfway through the first episode of a new series that you're already invested, and now stuck until the end. People would feast on the last of the autumn harvest, munching on root vegetables and whatever goat they could spare. Dinner conversation often revolved around worries of darker days ahead, and let's be honest, who wouldn't want to chat about the possibility of starvation while chewing on fibrous turnips? As part of the festivities, families would also prepare dumb supper, a meal set at a table for deceased relatives. Imagine setting an extra place for great-great-grandpa while everyone silently eats, trying to avoid the awkwardness of anyone accidentally mentioning politics or the weather. It sounds like a dinner party gone wrong, but it was their way of honouring and preparing to get a few things off their chests, in case those spirits had any residual grievances. Ghosts have their own ghosts of holiday dinners past too, after all. But the spookiest part of all, the belief that the boundary between our world and the other world was at its thinnest during Samhain. Some brave villagers even set out to summon the spirits for advice, flicking through their ancient tarot deck or something approximating it. Impressive skills for a sheep herder, but quite questionable for someone who learned reading and writing last week if they even managed that. The wisdom of the ancients sounded great until it came from the neighbour who forgot to check the expiration date on their mead. Spoiler alert, if the drink smells like swamp water, maybe skip asking about next year's crops. As the village raucous continued and spirits were called upon, anyone acting suspiciously, like overly enthusiastic about banana bread recipes, was likely to be called out as possessed. Suddenly a night meant for fun turns a bit darker and a lot more complicated. Nothing like a good, old-fashioned ghost hunt to liven up an evening. For the Celts, practicality and paranoia went hand in hand. Why take a chance when you can yell "witch" and have your neighbour carted off to who knows where? Talk about a spiritual community. What about treats, you wonder? Well, no one was handing out fun-size candy bars. Instead, people would leave food offerings outside their homes for wandering spirits, a kind of ancient version of leaving out milk and cookies for Santa. But let's be real. If you think trick-or-treaters are picky today, just imagine the judgmental ghost rejecting your finest turnip bread and stale ale. At the end of the night, as embers faded and whispers of the uninvited ghosts were quelled, the villagers returned to their homes, debating whether it had been a successful night or if old man Finnegan had seen way too many sheep in that deer costume. Samhain, it provided a feast, a fright, and perhaps just a spark of community in a world teeming with both fear and folklore. So, this Halloween, when you're fending off pesky kids with pillows for costumes, remember the laughter, the heirloom turnips, and perhaps even the deer-costumed mischief from those ancient parties. Isn't tradition grand? The Celts had a pretty vivid idea of the afterlife. Think of it like an eternal committee meeting with less coffee and more ominous fog. The land of the dead wasn't some boring office. It was a gorgeous green paradise. But that didn't stop the living from being paranoid. After all, who wouldn't be worried about Uncle Finnegan's ghost popping by for a chat after a few too many pints? In Celtic culture, life and death intertwined like a pair of overly enthusiastic dancers at a wedding, twirling together until you weren't quite sure where one ended and the other began. You see, the Celts believed that when you died, your spirit didn't just fade away like last week's leftovers. Instead, it moved on to a magnificent land known as the Otherworld. Imagine fields that glistened like green gold under a perpetual sunset, with fairies holding raucous parties and the occasional bard strumming a harp, probably out of tune. If Grandma Ethel got too rowdy after a night of drinking mead, you could bet she might just slide into the Otherworld and throw a few chairs like they were at an Irish wake. But let's not romanticize it too much. The Celts also thought that the Otherworld was governed by serious protocols. The dead had to navigate this afterlife bureaucracy or risk being stuck behind a celestial filing cabinet for all eternity. Think of it as having to fill out forms for your benefits, but the only ink they accept is made from the tears of your enemies. There were committees of gods and spirits overseeing different aspects, from guiding lost souls to figuring out who would get the last slice of heavenly bread. You'd think death would be a relief, but no. It came with paperwork and many, many meetings that seemed to stretch on longer than a sitcom reunion special. Navigating the Otherworld had its challenges, especially if you happened to be unlucky enough to run into the wretched Banshee. Picture this. On a breezy autumn night, an apparition suddenly appears, wailing and shrieking like a toddler who just lost their favourite toy. Instead of comforting, those with a sensitive disposition would quickly recall that becoming a ghost wasn't nearly as fun as you'd assume. Oh look, it's Aunt Maud, you'd think wearily, probably at a very inconvenient time during a town hall gathering. Now the Celts had no shortage of guidelines for proper conduct when it came to the afterlife. A solid belief held that if you wished to attain a comfy spot in the Otherworld, you'd better stay on the good side of the spirits while you were alive. Don't insult the river nymphs or forget to leave an offering of ale. Trust me, that can lead to some serious supernatural repercussions. You could end up with a vengeful ghost lodged firmly in your attic, and as we know from many horror movies, waiting for a long day to get exercised is far worse than any meeting you've ever experienced in the office. As the leaves began to change and Samhain rolled, Around, the Celts grew even more concerned. It was believed that on this night the veil between the living and the dead was as thin as a single strand of hair, particularly the one that your neighbour's cat inexplicably gets stuck in. The details of life and death became even murkier. Shadows danced, spirits mingled, and there was always that one annoying friend who thought they were in touch with the other side. Meanwhile, the rest of us were just trying to figure out how to avoid the local ghost while treating our friends with some candy. Try to convince a ghost that Skittles are not the answer to eternal happiness. Good luck with that argument. In the end, while the Celts loved a good story about ghosts and their afterlife adventures, it also kept them on their toes. Whether it was avoiding the banshee screams or settling disagreements with a committee of the dearly departed, their beliefs added a rich layer of humour and trepidation to what lay beyond. So next time you're sitting at a gathering and someone brings up the afterlife, remember this. It was all a little less about the ethereal and a little more about paperwork, dubious policies and laying low with Uncle Finnegan as he raided the snack table. After all, who wouldn't want to share a pint in the other world while debating the merits of haunting houses versus haunting pubs? Cheers to that. Costumes originally served a dual purpose. They were not only a means to honour the dead, they also provided a convenient excuse to get out of awkward social interactions. Ever found yourself cornered at a party, desperately avoiding an ex while sporting a witch's hat? It's basically medieval life at its best. Picture it. You're trapped, the conversation is waning, and suddenly you're wearing that pointy hat, hoping it somehow makes you look more mysterious and less desperate. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. But back in ancient times, costumes were far more than just an amusing accessory. They were survival tools in a land teeming with restless spirits. Back in the day, it was believed that dressing up in elaborate costumes could confuse and scare away wandering souls. You see, the Celts of ancient Ireland, who kicked off Halloween with their festival of Samhain, had a unique approach to handling the supernatural. They figured if you dressed like the dead, you could be mistaken for one of them, thereby dodging any unwanted ghostly encounters. Imagine wearing a tattered sheet and DIY skeletal makeup just to convince the spirit of your deceased Uncle Jim that you belonged in the afterlife instead of the living room. Sorry, Uncle Jim, no more holidays until you stop haunting the family reunion. As these traditions evolved, costumes became a key part of the festivities. By the Middle Ages, folks weren't just donning anything. Elaborate outfits had become the pride of communities, each demonstrating an impressive combination of creativity and resourcefulness. Imagine a child seizing upon the idea of a pumpkin costume made from a sack of hay, all while hoping to snag as much candy as they can carry. It's like a scavenger hunt on steroids, where the prize is not just sweets, but a chance to strut around town in hay-induced feathery glory. And let's not forget the significant role of religious influence. As Christianity spread, the Church took a moment to evaluate these pagan traditions. Naturally, they wanted to co-opt the festivities for their own purposes, leading to the merging of holy rituals and supernatural spookiness. Dressing up in costumes quickly turned into a double-edged sword, a way to honour saints 1 minute and pretend you're a demon the next. Yes, Father, I went to Mass. Right after I donned my devil horns and unleashed my inner mischief became the new confession style. Fast forward a few centuries, and we come to the Victorian era, when Halloween costumes became a fashion show of their own. Ladies and gentlemen would waltz round in ball gowns and tailcoats, while others decided that fear could take a fashionable turn with costumes to match. Ghosts got a glamour makeover, ghouls became chic, and traditional witches traded in the arched noses for elegant hats. Who knew that aiming to scare would result in some of the best outfits of the century? It was as if Project Runway had met the undead. Who would have thought? But what are costumes without a little bit of modern capitalism? As Halloween morphed into a commercial spectacle in the 20th century, costume companies sprung up like candy corn on a fall afternoon. Suddenly, you could buy your wildest fantasies in kitschy plastic form. Everything from princesses and superheroes to those notorious inflatable dinosaur suits that enable the wearer to lumber awkwardly through parties. What was once a grassroots act of creativity became a mascot of corporate interests, leaving everything feeling just a tad less authentic. Nonetheless, with this costume craze came unexpected opportunities for self-expression. More than ever, people found ways to unabashedly wear their identities, or alter egos, on their sleeves. Being a vampire or zombie offered everyone an excuse to liberate their inner mischief. Of course, I'm a blood-sucking creature of the night. It's just one of those phases I'm going through. And honestly, the stories that erupt during those wild parties, they're the stuff that gets shared at family dinners for generations. Who wouldn't want to recount how their lawnmower malfunctioned during the last-minute prep for the costume party and resulted in them somehow becoming a watermelon? Candy embedded with seeds, because why not? So, as you consider slipping into whatever whimsical get-up you've chosen for Halloween this year, just remember, costumes aren't just for fun. They're a way to connect with ancient traditions, tackle modern fears, and maybe, just maybe, avoid those awkward moments. Embrace the absurdity and laugh with those dusty spirits, because it's easier than facing your ex. Can you imagine a bunch of ancient folks knocking on doors asking for goodies? Oh great, here comes that noisy child in a pillowcase. Better give him some bread, or he might haunt my haystack. Trick-or-treating evolved from a blend of ancient customs involving offerings for the spirits. Little did they know candy would be the bait that hooked generations of kids forever. The practice can be traced back to the Celtic festival of Samhain, where the good people of the village believed that during this time the boundary between the living and the dead became as thin as their neighbour's patience at a dinner party. On Samhain night, families would leave out treats for both their loved ones who'd passed on and the friendly, or not so friendly spirits wandering about. I mean, nothing says, "Welcome to my home, dead Aunt Edna," like a plate of stale bread and a side of cheese. It was like an early version of DoorDash, where the delivery person was literally a ghost. However, if you neglected this kind of hospitality, well, don't be surprised if your haystack mysteriously collapses or your prize pig goes missing. Because you know how ghosts are. They thrive on disappointment and misplaced offerings. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and the practice morphed considerably. Enter the poor souls known as mummers, who donned costumes and went door to door offering songs, poems, or even spookier performances in exchange for food. Picture it. A ragtag band of performers showing up at your doorstep belting out half-rehearsed, haunting ballads. If I sing you a song about friendly ghosts, will you give me some pie? The pie was always important, not just for sustenance, but as a bargaining chip. These dressing-up festivities probably left a few villagers wondering if this was all part of a clever scheme to steal their last fig. As the 19th century rolled in, all this door-to-door performing evolved even further across the ocean to America, where immigrants brought their holiday traditions along like overpacked suitcases. In a nation strained by different cultures, Halloween gained a sort of mischievous flair reminiscent of its Celtic roots. But instead of singing for snacks, kids opted for a more straightforward approach, likely bolstered by the fact that sugar was suddenly a bit more affordable. The question was, how do you turn the ancient spirit offerings into a modern candy-collecting frenzy? Enter the first real trick-or-treat concepts. Kids began to knock on doors, demanding sweets outright, sometimes playfully threatening mischief if their demands weren't met. It's a miracle any neighbourhood survived the antics. Would you like to share your Butterfingers, or should I fill your garden with flaming bags of dog poop? Not that that ever actually happened, though imagine the neighbourhood drama. and woefully enough, during World War II, sugar was rationed. Candy shortages meant that trick-or-treating hit, more of a standstill than a kid stuck on the roof of the school during a playground scavenger hunt. Yet the sweet tooth of Halloween prevailed. In the post-war era, candy companies saw an opportunity, and suddenly every child was armed with pillowcases and white-knuckled excitement ready to scoop up every bar in the neighborhood. By the 1950s, trick-or-treating was so ingrained in American Halloween culture that the rest of the world began to catch on. The standard of knocking on people's doors with cheerful shouts of trick-or-treat became as iconic as horror movies scripted with no budget. We're here for the candy. You've been warned. It became a beloved and rite of passage tradition, celebrated with glee and overseen by mums hoping their children wouldn't bring home any suspiciously gooey treats. Fast forward to today, and you'll find that trick-or-treating is celebrated in over 30 countries, each putting their own twist on it. Whether it's lighting up jack-o'-lanterns to ward off evil or donning whimsical costumes that would make a fairy blush, the tradition has come a long way from those early days of spirit appeasement. So there you have it. The art of trick-or-treating wasn't just about the candy, it became about community, joy, and just the tiniest, most adorable hint of mischief. Now, someone hand me a Butterfinger. The Celtic Otherworld, a realm of fairy shenanigans. In Celtic folklore, the Otherworld was like the VIP lounge for spirits, sparkly, ethereal, with far too many fairy flits for comfort. The Celts believed fairies could be just as mischievous as that one friend who always insists on telling scary stories by the campfire. They'd lure you in for a dance, and next thing you know, you're lost for 7 years. Just how is that fair? Now, imagine a land filled with surreal landscapes, shimmering lakes, and the faint sound of laughter echoing through the trees. This wasn't just a weekend retreat. It was a full-on rave for the dearly departed, serving up performances that would put the glitzy Las Vegas Strip to shame. But the catch: you had to watch out for the fine print on the invitation. Fairy parties came with an unspoken warning to the unwary. Once you crossed the threshold into the other world, your reality tended to skew a little. You might emerge from a cave or the depths of a forest, only to find yourself surrounded by fae folk dressed in elegant finery, sipping on mead while sitting on clouds of cotton candy. Sounds delightful, right? But hold your horses. First you'd need to contend with mischievous sprites who would swap your voice for the sound of a crow, or give you a case of the hiccups every time you tried to recite a poem. It's like being stuck in an endless episode of a reality show where no one can explain the rules. You might think you could charm your way through it, but trust me, charm doesn't work quite the same way when your tongue is busy cawing out random bird calls. The landscapes of the other world are stories unto themselves. Picture rolling hills where time stands still and every flower is a hidden door. You might find yourself re-exploring childhood dreams where the trees whisper secrets, and even rocks have opinions about who should win in a game of tug-of-war. It's the kind of place where you attempt to offer an ancient oak a date over lunch, only to realise it's more interested in discussing soil quality than your love life. Talk about a bummer. Meanwhile, the fairies flit around, giggling at your human awkwardness, just like the neighbourhood kids enjoying the spectacle of an adult trying to jump rope. And let's not forget the food. The otherworld feasts were legendary, filled with dishes that looked like gourmet art installations. There'd be stews that shimmered like gemstones and pies so juicy they could make a rainstorm seem dry. But a word of caution: eat at your own risk. Nothing quite like biting into a fairy fruit only to discover that it's a bitter reminder of how your ex's cooking was always a little salty. Talk about a prank. If you weren't careful, a few unassuming berries could send you off on a wild chase through twisted paths. a real-life game of hide-and-seek with existential dread thrown in for good measure. Living in the other world meant embracing the chaos of your surroundings, where you suddenly found yourself exploring the depths of your own fear and hilarity. You might even stumble upon an old bard strumming a harp while telling ghost stories that both frightened and amused, leaving you unable to decide whether to chuckle or frightfully scream. Spoiler alert, the ghost was always way more interested in petty gossip than terrifying you. Yet there was something inherently magical about the other world that kept souls returning. It was a place where lives that had been blazing flames on earth could flicker to an everlasting glow. Whether it was to seek mischief, dance, or escape the everyday grind, the other world glimmered with the promise of fun, even as it teased you with the threat of sticking around too long. Armed with delightful absurdities, one had to keep their wits about them. Otherwise, you'd lose track of time and wind up missing all those bills that piled up on your kitchen table, all while waltzing through exquisite fields of vibrant flowers. So, as we float back from the land of fairy pranks and whimsical tales, it's essential to remember the balance the Celts revered. While the other world was a magical retreat from the mundane, it also served as a reminder to live lightly, embrace joy, and respect both the living and the unseen. After all, no one wants to be that hapless fellow who didn't heed the warnings and ended up passing 7 seasons in fairyland just to return home and discover that the pizza delivery guy had stopped servicing their street. In conclusion, the other world was the original "please hold my drink" moment, one where you might dive headfirst into the unknown only to find laughter, love, and perhaps a dance with one too many fairies. Just be sure to get your fill of cosmic giggles, and a firm plan on how to escape if the dance party gets too wild. Imagine carving out a pumpkin so it looked more terrifying than your Aunt Mildred's cooking. Jack-o'-lanterns have their roots in an Irish myth about a sneaky fellow named Jack who outsmarted the devil. When he died, the devil wasn't happy and shoved Jack into the dark with nothing but a turnip and an eternal grudge. Talk about a hot mess carved into squash. This legend of Stingy Jack, let's give credit where it's due, birthed the idea of illuminating turnips in desperate attempts to ward off Jack's wandering spirit, and any other potentially cranky ghosts with a vendetta while we're at it. Now, you might wonder, how did Jack end up with a pumpkin instead of a humble turnip? A little culinary evolution, my friends, along with the magic of colonization and commerce. In the 19th century, when Irish immigrants hitched their wagons to America, they quickly discovered that the local pumpkins were giants compared to their familiar turnips. These orange beauties not only offered a bigger canvas for creative carving, but also looked far less like they'd been run over by a rogue horse. So, instead of Jack wandering the universe holding a sad little turnip, we now had a jolly ghost bobbing along with a cheery pumpkin that glowed more invitingly than a gas station on a lonely road. Now, let's talk about the deep and meaningful symbolism of pumpkin carving. Spoiler alert. There's more depth to this tradition than meets the eye, or perhaps less. The truth is that people were likely just looking for a fun distraction to avoid discussing their real fears, like the taxes due next month or whether Cousin Larry would finally show up with his latest conspiracy theory. So light up a pumpkin and forget about your never-ending quest for adulting. After all, hiding your worries behind a grinning gourd is far more productive than staring at spreadsheets or mortifying Zoom calls. The joyous act of pumpkin carving was essentially a chance to let your creativity run wild, only to be repeatedly interrupted by the local kids who just couldn't wait until Halloween night. You now had to fend off pint-sized creatures, armed with nothing but candy-fueled energy and the determination to mutilate your beautiful work of art before you'd even had the chance to place it by your door. Carving the perfect jack-o'-lantern was like a mini Olympics, complete with contests for who could create the most terrifying expression, almost as cutthroat as backyard barbecues. After getting the pumpkin's face exactly how you wanted it, the next step was deciding how to light it up. Sure, you could go for candles, as long as you didn't mind the heart-pounding terror of fire hazards, or more likely, the chemical scent of burnt hair from accidentally leaning too close. But with modern innovations, why not ditch the flames altogether? These days, glowing orange sensations can be added to shimmering LED lights, or even blinking disco balls that make your front porch look like it's ready for an ill-timed rave night. On the other hand, the best part about jack-o'-lanterns isn't merely the crafty art of creating them, it's their incredible versatility. Seriously, what can't you do with a pumpkin? They've become the star of everything, from lattes to pies to the friendliest of autumn decorations. A pumpkin is basically the Swiss Army knife of the vegetable world, only infinitely more orange and far less useful when it comes to fixing your leaky faucet. Who knew these squashes could have such fame? Any social gathering during the fall season will inevitably lead to the question, have you carved your pumpkin yet? You know, the one that slides into your inbox at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, as if that were a paramount life decision. Let's not forget the overall rivalry between pumpkins and other seasonal squashes. Sure, gourds are great, but they pale in comparison to the iconic status of the pumpkin. Try showing up at a Halloween party with a decorative gourd and a chipper attitude. You can already hear people whispering, "Who invited this weirdo? Did they bring that pumpkin spice cologne too?" In conclusion, jack-o'-lanterns represent not just an evolution from turnip to pumpkin, but a celebration of creativity, community, and a dash of light-hearted silliness. Every Halloween they brighten up the dullest of nights and remind us that sometimes all you really need is a grin, carved in bright orange and ready to chase away the darkness. So this Halloween season, let your creativity shine through, and don't skimp on that extra layer of goofy, because whether it's a haunting face or a goofy smile, those pumpkins are here to serve you some serious seasonal joy. Long before Netflix and horror flicks had kids jumping behind couches, ghost stories were the OG form of entertainment. It was dark, chilly, and people had nothing better to do than huddle around a fire and share tales that made you question your sanity. Grandma's ghost haunting that tree? What a hoot! Turns out laughter was a great way to scare away the fear. Who knew? It was the ancestral version of binge-watching terrifying stories, but with added suspense. Namely, the threat of becoming a ghost yourself if you didn't keep the flames going high enough. Imagine gathering with your family bundled up in skins, nope, not the latest fashion trend, and tossing more wood on the fire because it was also your only source of light. Then, as the warm embers crackle and the shadows loom larger than your favourite uncle after Thanksgiving dinner, someone starts recounting a tale of a wandering spirit who was last seen looking for their pair of lost socks. Because who wouldn't want to hear about someone's afterlife wardrobe crisis? And you know what else? She never found the socks. Tragic! Cue the nervous giggles. As the storytelling began, participants would escalate the suspense like it was a game of who could jump the highest off a haystack. These tales weren't just for entertainment, they also served a purpose, much like warning labels, teaching moral lessons wrapped in fright. Don't wander out of the house alone lest you encounter Old Man Johnson's ghost, who still holds a grudge over that one time you knocked over his prized pumpkin. It was a classic example of getting spooked into good behaviour, a vintage don't make me call your mother moment dressed in ethereal sheets. Over time, these ghost stories evolved alongside our relationship with the supernatural. Villagers would compete not just for spooky tales, but also for the best props. Hey, nothing sets the mood quite like a well-placed skeleton. With candles, cobwebs, and even some hastily drawn chalk figures on the ground, who needed Hollywood? It was all part of the theatrics, creepy special effects, more like crafting box of bones level inventions, and they did it all without a safety net or a Facebook event. Children who listened to these ghostly tales were often given the chance to step into their own roles. "Ah, yes, darling, you can be the ghost of Grandpa Fred who lost the farm." And just like that, kids jumped at the chance to channel their inner spook. Imagine the tension as they flitted around in sheets, asking for candy while learning exactly how much of their ancestors' ghostly wisdom they were prepared to carry. Spoiler alert, it was usually not much. Lighting from within, those flickering flames with shadows dancing eerily over faces were crucial to the storytelling experience. And listen, you haven't really committed to the ghost story game until you've had a wood log fall crisply in the middle of a heated scare. It's like divine timing that could draw gasps fit for an audience. "What was that? The ghost is real!" Cue the excited shriek from the child who realised they're no longer being haunted by just the spirit of Grandpa Fred, but rather the weight of their poor listening skills. And don't forget the neighbours eavesdropping. As other villagers overheard tales of buried treasure or ghostly apparitions, they'd jump into the mix, battling for the title of the spookiest story. Forget winning a trophy. The real prize was survival in the same village where old ghosts mingled with the living. Storytelling became a village competition, as people vowed to outscare one another until even the spirits nervously checked their own ghostly anecdotes. Even today, as we celebrate Halloween, the tradition of gathering around to swap ghost stories continues. Whether it's the latest urban legend shared over pizza or a heartfelt retelling of the terrifying family road trip, each story reminds us of the connection we share with those who dared to tell their own haunted tales. So, grab your friends, dim the lights just a little more, and prepare for a new age of storytelling, where it's not just the ghosts who get to have the final scare. In this sense, ghost stories set the stage for Halloween traditions we still enjoy today, handing down the tradition of fright and laughter, often from one generation to the next. And just like that, the ghost stories of the past remain alive, proving that they never truly left the fire. They just went quietly into the next chilling chapter of Halloween evolution. Superstitions ruled the Halloween night, fueling the fears of villagers more than their in-laws ever could. Dropping a downturned broom inside your house, or letting a black cat cross your path. Get ready to pack your bags because you might as well start writing your will. Honestly, what were these people smoking? It was as if the Celts, in their infinite wisdom, said, "Let's make every little thing a potential cause for panic and lifelong regret. Forget about actual threats like bears or wolves. Nothing worried folks like the thought that a silly broom could bring forth a wave of bad luck. Imagine living in such an age. You wake up, take a glance at your half-baked breakfast of porridge that probably looked more like wall paste, and check out the outside world. Oh no, a single crow flew past my house. Time to dig my grave. Folks believed that omens came in all forms, even in the way the wind ruffled their hair. There was a neighbourhood bingo game you absolutely couldn't win if you forgot to cross your fingers after a sneeze and threw salt over your shoulder immediately afterward. Honestly, it sounds like a game show gone awry. Let's not forget the infamous black cats. If one dared to cross your path, well, pack up your things because you were destined for disaster. You could be on your way to the market feeling all chipper when suddenly a little furry demon strolls past. Do you shake it off, finish the trip and enjoy a lovely customer interaction with your butcher? Nope. You sprint back inside, barricade the doors, and prepare for the worst. This is it. The end times are upon us. Should I grab a roll of pickles or just hide in the cellar? Witches? Oh, those ladies were in trouble. If you were a woman caught gathering herbs or enjoying life's simple pleasures, suddenly you were suspected of witchcraft. A simple job as a potager could land you next to a fire, being prodded by villagers wondering if you could turn them into a newt. Did your neighbour's cat go missing? Well, sorry, but the execution squad is probably coming for you. After all, you might be a crazy herbalist with a side hustle of scary incantations. Heck, one supernatural woo-ha, and the entire town can suddenly become villagers with pitchforks looking for Halloween justice. And while we're at it, let's discuss the wonderfully weird practice of searching for the signs. Please tell me how rolling a set of chicken bones across the floor was seen as divination. A guilty party could convince themselves that whatever bones twitched were basically ghosts demanding their final wishes. Imagine the creativity. Oh look, the bones say I should never eat potatoes again, but that was my lunch. What's a dinner plan with a slight chance of cosmic chaos? Then there's the age-old belief that misfortune could arise from your everyday actions, like you accidentally pinch your neighbour's turnip instead of your own. Prepare for the curse of an angry spirit. Tripping in the woods? It's not just clumsiness. It's a sign of impending doom. They didn't even have smartphones to distract them from the fear. The only notifications were the crows cawing their discontent over whatever bone they found last night. But here's the real kicker. The folks who came up with these superstitions had no Netflix to unwind. They didn't scroll social media while sipping pumpkin spice lattes. No! They faced pregnant bats in the rafters with little more than a flickering lantern and a hefty hunk of wood to defend against the night, all while whispering chants of protection under their breath. What an era! In the end, these superstitions made Halloween a night of high-stakes panic. They transformed a formerly joyous festival into a competitive sport where tradition dictated whether you donned a costume or huddled behind a broomstick to ward off fate. So, the next time your squeaky pumpkin tries to sink its gourd into your evening plans, just remember, our ancestors lived in a world where fear came wrapped in woolly layers of folklore, anxiety, and a good old-fashioned curse or two. And hey, if you ever feel a sense of dread this Halloween, rest assured. But at least keep your brooms upright, because you never know when an ancient spirit will come for your Wi-Fi. On Halloween, bonfires lit up the night sky like settings for terrible romantic comedies. But bonfires weren't just for warmth. They had deeper significance, often seen as a way to ward off evil spirits. Hey, look! We're not only gathering around to sip initial crazed cider. This fire is a hot zone for bad juju. Gatherings around crackling flames were a staple of Samhain celebrations, allowing villagers to roast marshmallows or, romantically ponder the deep questions of life like, why do my feet smell like last week's stew? Now, if you believe the Celtic hype, these bonfires were no mere backyard grill-outs. They were massive, towering infernos that radiated brighter than a Netflix screen in a blackout. As flames danced and flickered, ancient folk would toss bones, herbs, and even livestock into the fire, hoping to appease the spirits and sky gods who were not thrilled about vacationing souls crashing their parties. Imagine a gathering where the entertainment involves casting livestock into a flaming pit, while your neighbour argues about who's the worst cook. Of course, there was no handbook on how to properly ignite a bonfire. Some people were genuinely crafting rituals, resulting in the neighbours gossiping about satanic rituals while your cousin encroaches dangerously close to the bonfire, completely missing the "don't burn your eyebrows off" memo. In those pre-Instagram days, you didn't worry about posting your stylish fire hairstyle. You just made sure the flames didn't become a high-stakes barbecue contest. Bonfires were also gathering points for kindling the spirit of community. Where else could you bond over how Bert's pigs inexplicably caught fire last year? As the flames roared, villagers would tell stories that would wilt leaves off trees, scary tales of wandering spirits, mischievous fairies, and, of course, the dread of your mother-in-law's uncanny ability to find out about any unreturned lawn gnomes. It all added to the festive ambience. Perhaps around this bonfire you'd hear a legend about a man named Jack, who outsmarts the devil with the tricks that would make even a cat blush. What resulted was a playful sort of fear, a friendly camaraderie that allowed you to let out a squeak while reassuring yourself that nobody would blame you for losing your mind over that peculiar rustling in the bushes. After all, you were pretty sure that was just Farmer O'Malley's goose going rogue again. But becoming the town's Halloween legend was just the cherry on top. The ancient Celts believed that the bonfires symbolised the sun, an act of preserving warmth as the long, dark winter months approached. Yes, those smart cookies knew what they were doing, standing around ignorant of the science behind fire's flickering light, claiming it as a divine hot tub for spirits. They may have cooked a goat or two, but they were also protectors of their warmth and community aspirations. People could bask in the glow, a reminder that colder months would come soon enough, taking with it the lovely familiarity of sweet honeyed cider and loved ones in costume. And let's not forget the romantic implications of gathering round the fire. It was basically like Tinder for ancients, but with flames. Nothing gets the heart racing like the possibility of off-tempo dancing and super awkward s'mores making, whilst pretending to avoid singing Lou Reed's Perfect Day Karaoke. Imagine sharing a roasted marrow with the person you had a crush on. Nothing says, "I like you," quite like chewing while simultaneously debating if that rustling in the bushes was a spirit, or Greg finally getting his life together. As autumn leaves softly floated away in the wind, bonfire nights became more than just wards against the chill. They morphed into a celebration of survival, community, and perhaps an excuse for seasonal drunkenness. They lit up faces and hearts, reminding everyone that as long as there was warmth in the fire, there would always be stories to tell, laughter to share, and ghosts lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for a chance to stir up trouble. So, the next time you find yourself near a bonfire during Halloween, don't forget the rich tapestry of legends and laughter woven around the flames. It's not just about roasting marshmallows and making plans to throw imaginary peasants into an imaginary fiery abyss. It's about holding on to traditions and finding warmth together amid kernels of joyous laughter and the flickering glow. Even if you're not sure if the guy next to you is an ancient spirit or just another human desperately trying to avoid awkward conversations about politics. Yes, Halloween bonfires became enchanting spaces where ancient souls and modern mortals met in a whimsical dance of history, perhaps unaware that they were indeed fueling a legacy that annoyingly lives on every year as we indulge in the beautiful chaos of Halloween traditions. As Christianity began spreading like a wild rumour, the church decided to take advantage of Samhain by blending the holiday with a twist of their own. Enter All Hallows' Eve, which managed to incorporate costumes with a religious undertone. Because why celebrate death when you can be holy about it? The church figured it was a perfect opportunity to reel in the pagan revellers with a few holy hooks. Nothing says join our flock better than combining fun with a sprinkle of fear about the afterlife. The clergy essentially thought, why not take a pagan party and slap a saint on it? That's how every good marketing strategy starts, right? So, as the Celts gathered around their bonfires, offering food to those pesky spirits, the early Christians were busy assigning the wicked aspects of Samhain to demons and starting a roster of saints for the good folks to celebrate. In other words, death became a little less about dirt and bones and a lot more about the pearly gates and why it's probably bad form to knock on them uninvited. Why have fun with fright when you can have fun imagining your heavenly mansion of cloud furnishings? This merging of traditions resulted in the whimsical yet mildly confusing holiday we know today. Picture it. Children would dress up not just to scare away ghosts, but also to emulate their favourite saints. Because who doesn't want to channel St. Francis while dodging evil spirits? Oh look, it's little Timmy dressed as St. Michael. Did you hear? He smote a dragon last Saturday. But wait, imbuing Halloween with a layer of piety didn't just magically make the ghosts disappear. As All Hallows' Eve unfolded, so did the particularly captivating tales of spirits. Beliefs about wandering souls continued to thrive. Frankly, traditions evolved at a pace slower than molasses on a cold day. Instead of simply fearing a ghostly visit, the church added a spin. Now you could fear the souls of the dearly departed and get a hand out of the deal in the form of stuffed bellies and occasional blessings. Trick or treat, more like trick or preach for the devout. Imagine village folk dressing up in sheep's wool, proclaiming their innocence as they spun tales of saints, while secretly praying that no one noticed their inebriation from late-night celebrations. Yes, I'm praying, not hiding from what I drank while decorating that scarecrow. It created a juicy blend of devotion and debauchery. The shift didn't go unnoticed, especially by the church's more serious members. Every bonfire danced with the flames of tension between the old traditions of Ard Rí, High King, and the new authority. Back when Samhain was at its peak, no one cared about church protocol unless someone knocked over the wig stand at the altar. Now they were forced to delicately dance around the contradictions of costumes that seemed just a bit too merry for the season. Are we celebrating saints, or are we just trying to drown out the sound of our shrieking conscience? Thus, the spirit of Halloween was caught in a delightful game of tug-of-war. Church gatherings were less about somber reflection and more about the risks of a sour stomach from all the feasting while pretending the devil was gone. Saintly rituals merged with festive food as congregations nibbled on baked breads for the souls while swiping the last egg tart from the fellowship table. The festivities didn't stop at mere costumes and baked goods. The church weekend turned into a contest of creativity. Who could craft the best saintly cake? Picture someone rolling in with a lifelike confection, carefully haloed with spun sugar, only for the local prankster to switch it for a pumpkin pie. Both delicious and mildly sacrilegious. All this contributed to the evolution of Halloween into something that would change endlessly for generations to come. So, from original harvest festivals to pious church suppers sprinkled with fearful folklore, Halloween's roots began winding into something uniquely modern, a lively manifestation of ancient beliefs that somehow survived both time and temptation. The joy of running through villages in a costume now blended with the history of desperate people searching for salvation, just as eager to receive candy as they were to dabble dangerously close to their pagan past. And as for the spirits of Samhain, well, let's just say they were left to contemplate whether it was worth checking in on humanity in the face of saints' blessings, or if it was finally time to take a spooky vacation on the otherworld beaches, perhaps sipping piña coladas inspired by their lovers instead. With the advent of the Enlightenment, people began to wonder if the spooky stories were just childhood fantasies. Suddenly, ghost stories were seen more as folklore than earnestly terrifying tales. Imagine a professor delivering a lecture. So ghosts, just social constructs. Let's move on to the significance of gravity. Yes, during this period of rational thought and scientific inquiry, shadows were cast not by lanterns, but by the flickering glow of reason. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to fill evenings with spine-tingling tales of the restless undead. No, we needed to analyse, ponder and dissect the very fabric of these spooky stories. This shift in thinking must have confused not just the general populace, but also the restless souls wandering around. Hey, we were just trying to have a good scare, they must have moaned from beyond the grave. Now you're telling us we're just figments of your imagination. Come on. Those poor lost spirits probably thought, well, if we're not getting the attention we deserve, should we start haunting louder? Maybe knock over a bookshelf or two? Enlightenment thinkers, however, weren't ready to play along with the spectral melodrama. Instead of hosting gatherings to swap ghost stories, these intellectuals opted for tea parties where they traded metaphors for measurable quantities and conclusions based on evidence rather than eerie experiences. "Do I believe in ghosts?" one philosopher might have asked while adjusting his wig. "Only if one can quantify their effects on temperature drops or tea leaves." Feeling a chill from that cold draft. That's just the windows rattling from the mad theories of the period. Ghost hunts were replaced by scientific expeditions, and amusements shifted from campfire tales to thrilling discussions on the nature of existence. "Do spirits have mass?" became the new question of the day, and honestly it probably didn't make for a great conversation starter at parties. People began to prioritize the search for logical explanations over the sinister allure of the supernatural. Besides, who needed a ghost haunting their home when the whole idea of the universe could be explained through Newtonian physics? Instead of hiding under their beds from invisible terrors, people began to question everything, carefully analyzing even the most mundane aspects of life. That rustling sound? Probably just the wind, or maybe tiny humans graduated from shadows to rodents. But even as the scientific quest for knowledge surged forth, ghost stories still had a home, albeit a more reluctant one. The urge to share strange anecdotes became akin to sharing a recipe for a family heirloom, suspicious, yet oddly charming. Instead of being fearful, people began to marvel at the absurdity inherent in their inherited tales. There was a delightful irony in realizing that ghosts meant to terrify had become trivial curiosities. One notable example was the advent of the ghost story as a fashionable genre. It was no longer merely horror. It now requested the courtesy of civilized intellectual dialogue. To be or not to be haunted? That is the query. Scholars gathered for debates, and ghostly figureheads transformed into characters worthy of examination as they took on their own brand of ambiguity. Was Lady Adeline truly doomed by a tragic love, or was she merely misunderstood in her sentimental journey? The transition didn't stop there. The rise of literature during the Enlightenment brought forth countless tales, collected and recounted in charmingly unflattering detail. Gustave Flaubert and Edgar Allan Poe came onto the scene like rock stars, embroidering tales that toyed with the boundaries of the rational and irrational. Why not combine science and the supernatural, they might have wondered, much to the chagrin of the establishment. Let's exhibit ghostly behaviours through the lens of psychological inquiry. And just when it seemed like the ghosts might vanish into the mist of time, Halloween morphed, not simply as a holiday for the ignored ghosts, but as a playground blending fear and reason. Decorations became less about warding off spirits and more about showcasing imaginative interpretations, an artistic canvas blending whimsical and grotesque. In a delightful paradox, all of this inquiry made Halloween not a mere shout into the void, but a celebration of all things that stirred beneath our logical surfaces. Ghosts danced through the Enlightenment, not as terror-inducing spirits, but as muses challenging rational thought. Thus, this whimsical collision of spooky folklore and scientific reasoning allowed Halloween to grow more complex, way more than boo or trick or treat could ever convey. The age embraced the light misleading the way, cherishing its darker stories mixed with New Age cognizance. So the festive spirit of the season adapted as intellectual cotton candy, simultaneously delectable, dreamlike, and just a tad alarming, ensuring that Halloween remained a welcome blessing on our calendars, teetering between rationality and the deliciously absurd ways of the past. Who says monsters don't make great party guests? The Victorians decided to spice things up a notch, or two, because why not? Halloween evolved into a time of lavish parties and genteel ghosts, the dress code. Wear your best morning attire and pretend you're not losing sleep over existential dread. Sounds festive. Imagine a gathering where everyone is dressed in the finest lace and satin, with more layers than an onion, and a funereal flair that makes even the most indecisive dresser look like a fashion icon. The fussy dresses and snazzy top hats clashed with the unspoken rule of enjoying a night filled with spine-tingling spectres and bountiful bowls of punch. As the haunting hour approached, the well-to-do elite of British society transformed their grand parlours into eerie wonderlands. These parties were less about spooky thrills and more a seductive construction of ominous charm, a Pinterest board of death to go. Elaborate decorations became paramount, featuring cobwebs, skeletons, and the occasional prophecy. Nothing could be too lavish. Ever tried to top a dinner party with ghostly rumours about Aunt Agatha's long-lost lover? Those types of stories hardly melted into the background when the chandelier flickered at the right moment. What's important to note is that this newfound love for Halloween coincided with an era where the spectre of death was ever present, primarily due to the Industrial Revolution cranking up the furnace of mortality rates. The average Victorian was diving headfirst into an existence where the Grim Reaper felt like a well-acquainted family member. It was traditional to memorialise loved ones through morbid soirees. Who wouldn't want to remember the dearly departed over sugar cookies and sacubeb wehil? But what about the games? Oh, the games that arose were whimsical and slightly ridiculous. There was apple bobbing, a time-honoured battle that would determine who had the agility of a ninja, and the toothpaste commercials of today's world had nothing on them. Just picture it. A bucket filled with water, a dozen apples, and an enthusiastic crowd snickering as you contorted your face in an effort worthy of a circus act. Fun fact, the apple bobbing game was inspired by a deeper lore, linking fertility and love to the harvest fruits, making it a fabulously absurd way to find true love, or lose several brain cells in the process. And let's not forget about the romantic stitch in the middle. During this time, Victorian health guides suggested that the spirits roaming the earth had a penchant for matchmaking. It wasn't uncommon for young ladies to set their sights on dashing spirits while sitting under a tree with an apple or two. Word on the street was that any time an apple was bitten into at a Halloween party, Miss Martha or Mr. William would dance their way into your heart, faster than Cupid himself could manage. And then there were the divination games, with Victorians borrowing from older traditions to concoct spooky rituals meant to predict fate. Ever tried to peel an apple in one long strand without breaking it? If you succeeded, it was said you'd get hitched within the year. Nothing like a little pressure to spice up your Halloween night. You don't just have to worry about witches in the woods, but also about getting that perfect peel. Yet perhaps the most iconic of these Victorian traditions that would remain with us until today is the elegant invitation for ghostly visits. People believed that their late relatives would join the festivities, and so each dinner table was set with extra plates and wine glasses, just waiting for Uncle Ernest to give one last clink before departing. This charming custom turned every fancy pants Halloween gathering into a sweet mix of absurdity and heartfelt nostalgia as guests whispered about whether Auntie Agnes would truly make her appearance. The decadence didn't just end at costumes and games. They took it to the next level, a full-throttle absurd calendar of events. Picture this: parlour games, interludes of poetry recitation, and ghost storytelling sessions. Everyone feigned surprise when a ghostly figure showed up at their fancy soiree. But let's be honest, it was usually just the butler in a sheet constructed hastily out of the last laundry day's rags. The Victorian era gave us the Halloween we know today, where the spooky meets the stately, and laughter was just as crucial as fear for a night of phantoms and festivities. Next time you find yourself sifting through a pile of decorative pumpkins, take a moment to thank the Victorians for turning an age-old Celtic festival into a glitzy, glamour-infused mockery of death, where the living dressed as the dead, all while fearing they may actually see them. Shall we continue with the next segment? Halloween entered economic territory once candy companies figured out that they could profit from this ancient holiday. But could they have invented a more terrifying treat than candy corn? The challenge was real, and it guaranteed that children would willingly destroy their teeth all for a little sugar rush. Picture it. A world where the chirpy trick or treat could soon turn into trick or a trip to the dentist. Imagine the love-hate relationship between parents and candy companies. As kids holler for their sweets, parents watch in horror as tiny hands dive into bags full of little sugar bombs, convinced this will lead to nothing but chaos, while simultaneously plotting how to sneak the good stuff for themselves. The commercialization of Halloween didn't happen overnight. It took years of well-placed marketing and an audience ready to embrace the spirit of spooky consumption. By the mid-20th century, manufacturers were churning out all kinds of candy with festive wrappers, perhaps to distract you from the reality that these calories would eventually steal your soul, or at least your waistline. Suddenly, tricks had become less about pranks and more about explicitly targeting candy stash levels. "Hey Billy, you want to TP Mrs. McGregor's house, or should we just compliment her on a cat?" And let's not forget the brilliant ploys that got kids amped up and parents frazzled. "Hey sweetie, can we just take your pumpkin basket to the store and, oh look, they have a giant bag of mixed candy." It was all too easy for children to come back from trick-or-treating with more treasures than the treasure map on the back of their cereal box, rivaling the loot from pirate ships they often dreamt about. The advertisements exuded more enthusiasm than a 4-year-old after a sugar high, delivering everything from the sour sweetness of gummy worms to the sinus-clearing shock of assorted skull-shaped candies. Even those innocent-looking chocolates choked with sugar had a new life goal: to take down dental practices. Think about it. Can you really celebrate Halloween without hearing a jingle that has absolutely nothing to do with pumpkins or ghosts? Your local store wasn't only selling costumes, they also lined their aisles with rows upon rows of candy that had sparkles, googly eyes, and names that could make a Halloween spectre jealous. It was like carting around an edible art gallery, although let's face it, your parents' dietary assessments were less than enthusiastic. Honestly, Sheila, did your husband really bring home chocolate-covered spiders? But these sugary delights didn't just stop kids in their tracks or disrupt the rhythm of polite trick-or-treat festivities. They gave rise to a new trend, the highly competitive candy haul. Adults now turned Sunday grocery trips into elaborate quests for the most sought-after confections. What better way to stop the neighbourhood kids from raiding their stash than by setting up a candy lockbox complete with a no trespassing sign? The stakes were raised higher than a ghostly apparition on a chilly October night. Halloween transformed from your grandparents' nostalgia to a battleground for companies to duke it out over who could create the best and weirdest confections. And yet, with this sugary evolution came a resistance, the backlash against commercialism. Many families began celebrating homemade Halloween, resisting the urge to just buy disposable candy bags. Think Pinterest dinners served with caramel apples, spooky cupcakes that were less likely to leave your house smelling like a dentist's waiting room, and a good old-fashioned apple bobbing contest amidst your front lawn sprinkled with fake cobwebs. It's as if people put on their crafting gloves determined to prove that holiday spirit could beat out the giant candy corporations. If only the children didn't turn their noses up at anything green. Now the holiday has become a strange blend of spooky fun and sugar-induced pandemonium. Who knew that the simple act of dressing up would lead to territorial disputes over who could rob the most candy from confectionery vaults, like pirates with an eye patch and a grudge, minus the excitement, except when it comes down to the last piece of chocolate left after plundering the bowl. And so, as we celebrate Halloween each year by dressing up, haunting our neighbourhoods, and collecting candy like it was the Holy Grail, remember, it's not just a silly tradition. It's a testament to the bizarre evolution and eventual commercialisation of a festival that was once rooted in ancient beliefs. Think of it as a sweet treat following a ghostly journey, a capitalist caper designed for maximum fun and minimum dental visits. So when you peek into that candy bowl, whether it's stuffed with gummy eyeballs or saccharine pumpkins, just know that somewhere between trick-or-treating and capitalism stands the bizarre yet delightful legacy of Halloween. Here's to the memories and cavities that linger long after the ghosts have left. Haunted houses were the stuff of spine-tingling delight long before escape rooms made their debut. People would create elaborate displays to trick sweethearts and make them question their very existence. Surprise! It's a ghost! Please stop screaming. The origins trace back to Samhain, where little was as entertaining as scaring the bejeebers out of unsuspecting villagers. Most of these houses weren't built with IKEA assembly instructions. They instead featured shamelessly rustic construction using whatever the builders could scrounge up. Think hay bales, old wood, and relics found in your great-uncle's attic that looked like they had more history than anyone wanted to know. Imagine stepping into a rustic cabin of horrors. The creaking door, perhaps borrowed from a local rotting barn, squeaked open like a rat's laughter. Inside, cobwebs cascaded from every corner, and the scent of something vaguely resembling burnt popcorn mingled with musty hay. The ambience, perfectly designed to send chills down the spines of the unsuspecting visitors. Littered about the rooms were ghastly decorations, a collection of plastic skeletons, dismembered body parts, and ghastly faces made of half-rotted cabbage or something equally unsettling. It was the medieval equivalent of that time your cousin insisted on wearing a clown wig to dinner. There was also the matter of the scare tactics. Organisers would set all sorts of traps and mechanisms, which must have been a creative detective's dream. Intricate pulley systems set up in darkened corners would drop temporary ceiling coverings made from burlap sacks that exploded into your face after the perfect amount of anxious build-up. Instead of storing snacks, it was all about storing fear, like we were experiencing a Halloween-themed game of charades gone horribly wrong. "This is what you get for not respecting the spirits," they would cry as the young couple backs away in horror. The rich could afford to hire actors to jump out and terrify the guests. Real live creepy people who were better at epithets than scare tactics. But those on a budget resorted to other methods, such as a friendly neighbour in a fraying ghost costume groaning monosyllabically and hoping that ancient rusted tools arranged in horrifying displays would compensate for the lack of applicable acting skills. The rumours would then fly around town about whatever ghastly thing had been witnessed within those eerily decorated four walls. "Did you hear? The Smiths' haunted house claims they saw visions of the past." This was just a creative way to get people talking about the lack of pumpkin pie at your last family reunion, only now with more shadows and pumpkin spice-induced chills. Yet, amid all the pomp and chilling spectacle, wasn't it all just a little silly? The reality is, not everyone had the capacity for jump scares or got into the spirit of breaking out in mock screams. In fact, some of these haunted houses morphed into comedic fails, half-hearted ghosts that looked like they'd stumbled out of a thrift store, and the resident witch who was better suited for a coffeehouse poetry reading than your actual frightful duties. It's all fun and games until Aunt Linda accidentally summons a raccoon instead of a spirit, someone could quip in the aftermath of it all. Over time, the charming chaotic energy of true haunted houses paved the way for modern adaptations more rooted in entertainment than fright. It's incredible to think that these primitive attempts at scaring family and friends eventually grew into the elaborate haunted mazes we see today. equipped with authentic-looking props and actors upon actors, because who wants to be the only person keeping real tales alive in a world dominated by joke-telling ghosts with questionable costumes? Now, as you make your way through ostentatiously constructed haunted attractions, boasting high-level animatronics and Hollywood-level scare tactics, remember that beneath it all lies a tradition steeped in family gatherings and laughter, though plenty of screams along with it. "Watch out for the monster behind you," they'll shriek while a 14-year-old in a mask distracts you from the fact that you're standing next to a gigantic inflatable pumpkin with a smug grin. And that might be the truest haunt of all, the realization that fear can be enjoyed, even celebrated, especially when clothed in laughter and a light-hearted scare. Who knew the root of haunted houses was just a bunch of terrified villagers trying to blend a good scare with a night of fun? Halloween has officially come a long way, but who said ghosts can't chuckle while lurking? So the next time you hop into a haunted maze, remember that it all started with a cauldron of ghosts, a few giggles, and a very questionable scare tactic. Or was that just Uncle Ted again? The candy craze transformed Halloween into a gastronomical competition of who can stuff the most sugary contraptions in their mouths. Can you really call it a celebration without someone nearly choking on a Tootsie Roll? Welcome to America, the land where dental visits soared right after October. But how did mere sugar get its sticky fingers on this ancient festival? Let's take a bite out of the sweet history behind the treat tsunami that overtook All Hallows Eve. In the beginning, candy wasn't the go-to offering for candy-hungry goblins and wailing witches. Instead, folks handed out cakes, nuts, or even fruit. Yes, fruit. What were they thinking? Bet you didn't know that in the early days of trick-or-treating, a shiny apple was considered a major haul, and not because of any moral undertones, but simply because that was as good as it got back then. Can we just say it was a dark time when kids had to settle for a cold war of sacrificial oranges? Fast forward to the 20th century when the sugar industry began to catch wind of this nighttime sugar rush. With the rise of mass production in the 1920s, candy began to take a front row seat like the quirky uncle at family gatherings. Instead of poppable peanuts or dried fruit, manufacturers started churning out fantastical, colourful confections. Picture this. It's 1930. A boy dressed as a ghost stands at a stranger's door, and when they open it, he's greeted with a bag of, begging your pardon, Hershey bars and Mars bars. That's right, the struggle shifted dramatically. By the 1950s, candy companies began cranking out Halloween-themed treats faster than you could say, Sugar Rush. Hello, fun size. The notion that size matters took a back seat when bite-sized candy hit store shelves. This was revolutionary. Now, kids didn't need to commit to a full chocolate bar. They could nibble on a plethora of little delights. It's as if Willy Wonka himself had waved a candy wand, and voila! Wieners could take home bags bursting at the seams with miniatures, like they were collecting Pokemon cards instead of diabetes risks. Around this time, candy corn made its grand appearance, having been a staple of fall festivals way before it was officially condensed into Halloween lore. Who knew this tri-coloured sugar spike would become one of the most polarising narratives in confectionery history? You're either a staunch supporter of candy corn or you're an outright hater, debating its worth while munching on a Snicker. Speaking of culinary crimes, let's not forget that questionable Halloween candy that everyone knew could send you into a sugar coma faster than you could say goblins. And oh, the marketing. This period boasted some of the slickest advertising campaigns, promoting sweets through colourful wrappers and catchy jingles that, shockingly, still haunt your dreams today. Each October, candy companies leaned hard on nostalgia, costumes, classic movie monsters, and a great big cauldron of sugar-coated dreams. Wrapped in shiny paper, those sugary morsels were practically begging to get into little hands, promising the thrill of sneaking a piece before dinner, inappropriately reckless, and all for a little sweetness. Now that we're in the candy-corn-coated present, trick-or-treating requires little more than a themed pillowcase for the hall. Thanks to an enchanting history of autumnal gluttony, bathroom scales reverberate with fright even before the clock strikes midnight on Halloween. But come childhood, stuffed with sugar dreams and imaginary ghosts, we'd trade more candy than most traditional economies. Now that's the real cultural horror story. Ask anyone on Instagram with a bowl full of unopened snack-sized treats, only to be ridiculed by ghosts from their youth. So, as we lace up our foam fingers, giant pizza costumes, and Joker makeup this Halloween, remember the saccharine journey that brought us here. The sweet sweat and sticky trials of yesteryears combine to fuel our current traditions, making Halloween a pillowy, sugar-laden theatre of delight. Cheers to candy, the sticky glue that binds us together in the absolute absurdity of the season. The next time you bite into a chocolate bar, just think of the thousands of years of history that brought you this crucible of chaos, and don't worry, just make sure to floss. As cultures evolved, so did costumes. What started as frightful brawls turned into cuter renditions fit for children, and less so for the nightmares. It's hard to believe that someone once donned a rotting head for a laugh, but boy, such fashion choices were the talk of the village. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and you'd find that dressing up for Halloween was less about scares and more about looking adorable, or downright confused. Take the 1900s, for instance. Instead of splurging on spine-tingling get-ups, children donned masks and capes that made them look like extras from a low-budget horror movie. Picture a pint-sized vampire with a cape that looks suspiciously like Grandma's old couch. Let's peek into those early years of Halloween. Children would roam neighbourhood streets wearing whatever they could cobble together. Think of the costume equivalent of a culinary disaster. A cardboard box with a couple of eye holes cut out. Some smeared face paint. It was like a DIY horror show gone wrong. You had your standard ghosts, witches and pirates. What could go wrong with an ill-fitting bandana and a plastic sword? If anything, the more erratic the ensemble, the more charming your costume became. Oh, that kid's painted green and wearing a shower curtain. Adorable. As the years rolled into the 1920s and 30s, costumes began to take shape as a more organised affair, thanks in part to those bustling department stores who seized the spook opportunity. No longer were you limited to whatever mum could scrounge up from the attic. Instead, you could walk into a store, peruse under the flickering fluorescent lights, and pick out a shiny all-in-one costume. The focus switched, however. Instead of staying slapdash, children flaunted often frightfully outrageous outfits of cartoonish characters, or exaggerated villains that made Grandma's old couch look sophisticated in comparison. Who could forget the rich aroma of cheap plastic wafting from your favourite superhero suit? The post-war 1940s and 50s introduced the American dream into the costume market scene. Costumes began to reflect more of a sanitized ideal. Fairy tale characters, princesses, and even soldiers peppered the Halloween parade, which meant that no rotting heads were in sight. Kids learned quickly, if they wanted to collect that candy haul, looking cute was the way to go. Oh, look at little Timmy, he's a charming Peter Pan, and right next to him is Sarah dressed as a delightful fairy. So precious. Jump forward to the 1960s and 70s. This era defied the rules, with a noticeable backlash against those sanitized representations. Costume parties emerged, and children began to channel a hipper vibe. Enter the Wicked Witch clad in sequins, the devil holding a pitchfork that looked more playful than sinister. It was a time of grooviness, and costumes began to reflect that free spirit. While someone's mother still fussed over whether that material would catch on fire from a candle, kids were now busy hiding behind someone's very tall brother, second-guessing if the slingshot they made in class was deemed appropriate weaponry for this year's superhero costume. As the 1980s approached, the arrival of pop culture started reshaping every Halloween night. Suddenly, you weren't just dressing up as a generic ghost. You were a ghost holding a Walkman. The marketing surrounding costumes became absurdly clever, and with the rise of consumerism, kids wanted to stand out. The brightly coloured pastel monstrosities of the era took over Halloween sales, with inflatable accessories becoming increasingly necessary. Halloween became more like a budget blockbuster than a night of chilling fun. Is that a 3-foot-tall inflatable pumpkin king in the yard? Oh dear Lord. At last we arrive at the present day. Now adults often celebrate Halloween with the same fervour and occasional confusion as children. With online shopping, options reach dizzying heights. Costumes that are too cool for school or too silly for Snapchat demand attention in every social media feed. When someone rolls up as a giant taco or a sentient hot dog, you know they've channeled the spirit of Halloween perfectly. Still, a fine line exists. Nothing sends shivers down your spine more than seeing a grown adult dressed as a toddler, and I don't mean literally in size. Costumes today may range from whimsical to downright borderline ridiculous. But at the end of the day, what remains consistent is the enthusiasm, the laughter, and the awkward moments that have come to define Halloween. So dust off your old costume, add some crazy pizzazz, and remember, it's all in good fun. Whether you're wearing a pillowcase or holding a sword made from cardboard, Halloween is one night where you can let your imagination fly. No matter how ridiculous it appears, there you have it. From the days of rotting heads to adorable fairy wings, costumes have transformed over the ages. So tonight, as you put on your well-planned outfit and head out for some trick-or-treating, just remember to keep it spooky and let your inner child take the reins. Happy haunting! Once equal parts fun and fright, Halloween now marches to the beat of consumerism like a sugar-fueled parade. We're talking giant inflatable yard decorations, spooky brunch menus, and costume shops popping up where your favourite pizza parlour used to be. Thank goodness they've managed to keep the horror alive while blending it seamlessly with capitalism. In the delightful chaos of Halloween shopping, you can find everything from terrifyingly accurate vampire capes to inflatable witches that could practically double as weather balloons. So have you ever wondered how pumpkin spice lattes became synonymous with spooky season? Or when candy corn earned a permanent place in our hearts, despite being the most despised sweet since the dawn of time? Let's unravel this mind-boggling transformation together. Firstly, let's talk about our obsession with decorations. Yes, your neighbour's yard looks like a haunted theme park, but do you really think they're scaring anyone? The only things truly terrified are the local squirrels valiantly trying to escape the inflatable graveyard. Imagine yourself heading into a suburb during October, and it feels less like a quiet evening stroll and more like a tour through a twisted carnival. With skeletons conspiring to breakdance on porches and ghosts floating overhead like disgruntled kites, the spirit of Halloween is alive and well. Who knew decorating would lead to neighbourhood-wide competitions? It's like the Olympics, but for creepy cucumbers and cartoonish spiders. And then there's the innovative wave of Halloween-inspired eateries. Creepy cocktails and gory gourmet burgers grace the menus of trendy cafes, making you question when exactly food became so theatrical. Curious if that purple drink actually has a name, or if it's just a clever disguise for grape soda. You'll never be quite sure as you sip away, pondering the likelihood that last year's pumpkin pie is sweating in the back corner. In today's world, dinner parties have gone from elegant dinner settings to Let's see who can fit the most gummy worms into their mouths while wearing a witch's hat. Bon appetit! As consumers fill their bags with Halloween goodies, the costume industry seized the moment with unbridled enthusiasm. Remember when the art of costume making involved DIY creativity? Now it's just about grabbing the nearest pre-packaged get-up that promises a 100% chance of indecent exposure. Nothing screams commitment like dressing up as a sexy fire hydrant or a taco at the office Halloween party. And while you wrestle with your regrets over dubious decisions in the costume aisle, don't forget to account for all the options. A sexy caterpillar? Sure. First thing that pops in your mind during your existential crisis. It's the ultimate self-expression through the lens of ridiculousness. However, amidst the inflatable ghouls and questionable margaritas, let's explore the real horror lurking behind today's commercialized Halloween. Consumerism itself. It's as if we collectively decided to replace ancient traditions with an avalanche of plastic distractions. Remember when children would venture door to door, collecting candy from neighbours full of character and charm? Now, they're probably being handed $10 gift cards instead, as if candy had been formally replaced with capitalism's sweet seduction. What about that sense of community? More like a competition about who can accumulate the most splattered fake blood on their front lawn. Not to mention, with the rise of social media, Halloween has transformed into a showcase for the creatively inclined, or desperately seeking validation. Anyone could become a spooky influencer overnight with tiny screens filled with hauntingly curated posts featuring costumes, crafts, and crafted cocktails that look like they could win a Michelin star. Suddenly, Halloweening has become a full-time job for some, proving that no one truly abandons the thrill of simply haunting your kitchen. In conclusion, while Halloween's heart may have once beat with the cadence of spooky tales and autumn harvests, today we find it throbbing to the rhythm of retail. Who pairs perfectly with a pumpkin? Just check your neighbour's yard. And in the grand tragedy of our spooky evolution, we've somehow lost sight of what it truly means to celebrate this haunting season. May your Halloween ventures remain filled with laughter, pumpkins, and a few ghosts. But please, leave the over-the-top commercialism for the next holiday invasion. After all, life's too short to be haunted by more than just a few extra pounds of candy corn, right? International Halloween. How everyone gets in on the fun. Halloween isn't just an American thing anymore. Countries around the world adopted their own variations of the spooky season with unique twists. Germany, pumpkin turning competitions. Mexico, sure, Dia de los Muertos incorporates some Scoogle vibes. Let's be real, Halloween is now the international language of haunted costumes. So put on your witch hats and grab your broomsticks because we're about to take a whirlwind tour of how the world celebrates Halloween, each with its own splash of cultural flair. Let's start with the land of beer and pretzels, Germany. The Germans are nothing if not festive, and they've taken Halloween and made it their own. In villages across the countryside, they host a Kürbiswettbewerb, or pumpkin competitions, where dishevelled and determined townsfolk gather to showcase their most outrageously carved pumpkins. You'd think it's a contest for the best Insta photo, but no, it's a fierce battle for bragging rights over who can turn a humble gourd into a nightmarish horror show. Ever witnessed a pumpkin that appears to scream in terror? Now that's what I call artistry. And somehow, amidst all the carving madness, someone invariably ends up wearing the pumpkin as a hat. It's practically a rite of passage. Over in Mexico, the spirits take on a different hue with Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead. The cultural blend of vibrant colours and happy remembrance transforms Halloween into a revelry that feels both sacred and spirited. Families gather at cemeteries to feast alongside the spirits of their loved ones, who they believe return from the afterlife to join the living for festivities. Imagine decorating altars with marigolds, candles, and sugar skulls. It's like an arts and crafts fair collided with a celebration that screams joy. The unsettling part, you might find a ghost or two parked next to a taco stand. Excuse me, did I just see Grandma? In this enchanting fiesta, it becomes less about lurking in the shadows and more about dancing with the past. Across the Atlantic in Ireland, the birthplace of Samhain, communities rally for pumpkin festivals and haunted trails, full of merriment and mischief. Clad in costumes ranging from historical figures to highly detailed video game characters, the laughter and giggles of eager children fill the air. But wait, because they've got one twist up their sleeves. The tradition of telling stories about banshees, leprechauns and lingering spirits stirs howling laughter mixed with screams. It's a perfect recipe for a well-rounded Halloween experience. Kids and adults alike swap spine-tingling tales while munching on candy. The perfect excuse to relish the best part of Halloween in any language, sweets. In Japan, Halloween has been adapted from pop culture cravings. Here, the focus is often more on the costumes themselves, with mega cities like Tokyo buzzing with breathtaking costumes that make red carpets look like underwhelming catwalks. Japanese Halloween may not come with ancient rituals, but it packs a punch with creativity. Picture adults and children donning everything from anime characters to imposing yokai spirits, all strutting about under the neon glow of karaoke bars. Halloween in Japan has become a mecca for those wanting to show off their artistic flair and love for fantasy, proving that even the scariest monsters can take a break for a karaoke showdown. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, Halloween morphs into the Fiesta ng mga Patay, or Feast of the Dead. It's a day to both honour and party with the dearly departed, and it's as heartwarming as it is eerie. Families flock to the cemetery, sprucing up grave sites with flowers and food. Yes, you heard that right. It's not uncommon for someone to enjoy a lively picnic above their loved one's grave. Pass the fried chicken, Grandma. The unique pairing of the homage and celebration is a touching reminder that in many cultures the dead don't fade away. They reside in collective memory, living on in shared stories. Finally, as we lock our ghastly gazes back to America, it's evident that the influence of global Halloween traditions creates an ethereal tapestry that reflects both joy and fear. Neighborhoods transform into interactive parades, where homes are adorned with everything from skeletons to creepy crawlies. Trick-or-treating becomes less about acquiring the most candy and more about fostering community friendships. After all, where would we be if we couldn't bombard our neighbours with gruesome costumes while standing squarely on their front porch? So Halloween is no longer just an American holiday. It's a cultural phenomenon embracing laughter, memories and creativity. As different nations evolve their own spooky traditions, they remind us that whether we're carving a pumpkin, honouring the spirits, or simply getting caught in a costume scuffle, we're all a part of this haunted global celebration. One shared laugh, bite of candy, and nerve-wracking scare at a time. As horror films made their way to our screens, Halloween culture exploded into something theatrical and fear-induced. Classics like Halloween and The Exorcist became mandatory watching for every Halloween enthusiast, leaving an impression that haunted viewers long after credit rolls. Forget therapy, let's watch some horror flicks instead. Suddenly, haunted houses weren't just about stray cats and creaky floors. They were inspired by those screen-screaming moments that made you question your very existence. Imagine cozying up with popcorn, watching a killer run rampant with a mask and thinking, maybe I should have taken that shortcut through the graveyard after all. Let's talk about the real stars of Halloween, the villains. The iconography of movies has redefined what it means to scare. giving rise to a pantheon of characters that have become staples in Halloween lore. Freddy Krueger with his terrifying claw glove wasn't just a figment manufactured in someone's wild imagination. He became the nightmare we all feared was lurking under our beds, especially after that one too many pumpkin spice lattes. Michael Myers, a silent, unrelenting force of chaos, showed us that sometimes the bathroom wasn't the most private place. It was on Halloween night with your friends, when silence and creeping dread clouded over joyous revelry. As popcorn-munching moviegoers revelled in the catchy theme tunes and spine-chilling plots, they began to incorporate these figures into their Halloween celebrations. Cue the rise of costumes that were surprisingly budget-friendly too. After all, who needs an elaborate design when you can just wear a Michael Myers mask and a jumpsuit? Nothing like getting half your Halloween budget back for putting together a killer costume in 3 minutes. But horror films weren't just about gore. Many offered laugh-out-loud moments, even if they didn't mean to. Take Scream, for example. Who hasn't found themselves snickering in disbelief as teenagers made foolhardy choices while being stalked by a masked lunatic? This genre blended dark humour with jump scares, allowing audiences to simultaneously laugh, cry, and cringe all at once. Halloween festivities began embracing this blend of thrills and giggles, leading to parties where who's been stabbed games replaced innocent charades, adulting at its finest. And let's not overlook the shift in haunted houses. Previously, they were reliant on the scares offered by local ghost stories and urban legends. Now they are bedecked with elaborate movie set designs that bring horror flicks to life, even if fleetingly. Who doesn't want a little piece of horror history while waiting in line to see if you'll get chased by a guy in a bloody apron wielding a chainsaw? The anticipation builds as you ponder, will I scream or will I flee? And let's admit, if you don't scream, you just aren't doing it right. As Halloween started, incorporating all these shocking themes, social gatherings began to flourish. Friends would gather, not just to critique costumes, but to host bloody viewing parties based on the year's biggest horror hits. Could one even celebrate Halloween without arranging a watch party for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and a pumpkin carving session while barely dodging a drill from a mildly concerned neighbour? Absolutely not. Halloween had transformed into the ultimate test of stamina, both mental and physical. Another spin-off from horror films? The rise of Halloween-themed merchandise that capitalizes on fear, from grotesque lawn gnomes to scented candles that emit the aroma of haunting woods. That's right. Who wouldn't want your home smelling like the horror aisle of a horror film rental store? The scary irony is that while you're enjoying the aroma of freshly cut lawn with a hint of despair, there's still that lurking fear of someone ringing your doorbell dressed as a ghost, who just might be planning on raiding your candy bowl for the umpteenth time. And lest we forget about how horror movies spawned your Halloween shopping sprees, suddenly, costumes became a potential goldmine as you rummage through stores, debating between frightening poorly made ghost sheets or overpriced Freddy Krueger gloves that would likely be tossed aside by the second week of November. All thanks to those horrifying masterpieces, Halloween transformed from a simple celebration into a lavish affair filled with fright, schadenfreude, and sugary chaos. So next time you settle down for your annual Fright Fest, remember how the film industry's love affair with all things spooky breathed fresh life into Halloween. You've traded sweet trick-or-treat chimes for thrilling screams, and who wouldn't agree a good scare is worth just about chomping on a dozen candy corn to kickstart the season of fright? As the credits roll on this haunting night and your favourite scarefest comes to an end, let nostalgia wrap around you like a cosy blanket, because contrary to popular belief, for every spooky ghost story, there's always the sweet promise of a Twix bar waiting for you at the end of the night. Are you ready to dive in? Across the globe, Halloween-inspired traditions emerge to celebrate and remember the dead. From Mexico's Day of the Dead festivities, with calaveras grinning in glee, to Scotland's guising traditions, where kids dress up and perform for candy. The world united in its toasty love for sweet deals and sweet souls. In Mexico, the air fills with vibrant colour and the sweet scent of marigolds as families gather to honour their loved ones. Cempasúchil, the marigold flower, acts as a guiding light for spirits returning to their earthly homes. Family altars laden with photos and offerings transform into a carnival of remembrance, rivaling even the most extravagant birthday parties. Ever had a party that included a giant sugar skull? I wouldn't advise it unless you're ready for some deep philosophical discussion about mortality, and maybe a sugar rush like no other. On the flip side, in Ireland and Scotland, Halloween, bearing its original name of Samhain, takes hold. Children don't just dress as witches and goblins, they become their historical counterparts, brave warriors, mystics, or even axe-wielding druids. Imagine children running around casting faux spells instead of asking for candy, an adorable chaos of questionable magic. The tradition extends to visiting neighbours' homes, not just for sweets, but for theatrical mini-performances resembling ancient ritualistic practices. Here, I'll sing you a song, and in return you temporarily give me sustenance. Who wouldn't jump at the chance to be entertained while getting their door knocked on? Meanwhile, in Japan, where the ghost festival, Obon, allows festivities to straddle the fine line between reverence and the weirdness of tempura. This isn't your average festival. Spirits of ancestors are believed to return home during Obon, and families honour them with dances, lanterns and offerings. But let's be real, the best part is the dances, which feel more like a vibrant flash mob than a grave solemnity. There's nothing quite like prancing around with a loose idea of your great-grandfather's ghost and dancing the night away. Thanks for the genetic predisposition for bad knees, Gramps. Now let's shake it. In the Philippines, they take it to a whole new level with Panagbenga, or Flower Festival. Here, it's a celebration of life and pillars of community spirit rather than focusing on the dead. Flowers, parades, and street dances take over as families gather to create floral floats and celebrate the beauty of the living. Perhaps a missed opportunity for the undead to join in. I mean, who wouldn't want to see a ghost on a float? In England, Halloween embraces its more spectral side through traditional ghost stories. When areas known for their spookiness come alive, streets become haunted stages where youth recount spine-tingling legends and tales of long-lost spirits. Pro tip: if you're out on the town, avoid the neighbourhood graveyard on Halloween, unless you bring popcorn to enjoy the free show, or, the company of friendly ghosts. But let's not forget the influence of pop culture. The effects of horror films, spooky merchandise, and witchy fashion can't be understated. Every USA Halloween transforms into a twisted casting call, where vampires, witches, and superhero mashups roam door to door. Do you think the undead care about trending costumes? At least they don't have to worry about returning empty-handed. The mailbox at your doorstep becomes an invitation cluster for the costume party of the century, with even the laziest among us draping a bedsheet over their heads and calling it a ghost. As you can see, Halloween has morphed into a multifaceted global celebration that unites people, whether through remembrance, humour, or downright mischief. Whether you're offered a slice of spooky cake, engage in a raucous game of ghostly charades, or find yourself at a themed pub crawl, the essence remains the same, a longing for connection, playfulness, and perhaps a little fright. So don that costume, grab that candy, prepare those ghost stories, and do what connects us all, celebrate life, death, and everything in between. Now, if only we could find a culturally appropriate way to serve candy corn that doesn't end in a scream. With Halloween traditions travelling far and wide, how do you uniquely celebrate this captivating night? Whatever you do, from spooky rattles to celebratory dances, just remember, Halloween is a magical potluck featuring the weirdest of the world's creations. The Haunting Whispers of Halloween, Storytelling Resurgence. Recently, storytelling has resurfaced in popularity as a key component of Halloween nights. People gather around flickering campfires or cuddly couches, ready to share chilling tales that may or may not be based on their neighbour's garden gnomes. Ghosts aside, gathering together for spine-chilling stories can create connections stronger than any candy ever could. It's like pulling a cosy sweater over your fears, wrapping yourself in the familiar narrative while keeping the lurking shadows at bay. So, how did we transition from telling tales around a fire to scrolling through our phones for the latest TikTok horror stories? Grab a mug of something warm and let's delve into this eerie evolution. Gathering for spooky stories helps rekindle bonds that slacken during the year. Remember that one family member who insists they once saw a ghost fly out of the attic, or the friend who swears they've had their sugar skulls stolen in the wee hours. These aren't just tales of the absurd, they create a communal sense of thrill and nostalgia. It's that delightful mix of terror and laughter, the moment everyone has a chance to shriek and laugh at once. It's all in good fun, we tell ourselves, a comforting mantra as we hide behind our pillows at the punchline's crescendo. But what is it about storytelling that appeals to humanity's deepest, most primal instincts? Well, for starters, storytelling is as old as civilization itself, predating even the emergence of fancy TVs or streaming devices. Before there were cozy hearths and plasma screens, people gathered in caves sharing accounts of the creatures that roamed outside. Picture it. Cavemen and women huddled together, eyes wide, while someone waves a club and theatrically recounts a run-in with the fearsome mammoth of the moonlit glade. Set the scene with dim lighting and the occasional woo sound effect, and voila, you've got yourself a genuine prehistoric thriller. In modern times, haunted storytelling retains its charm, laced with a hint of nostalgia. Ghosts, ghouls, and urban legends flow effortlessly from pocket-sized smartphones to haunted living rooms. Now, as you settle down after an exhausting day, you might find yourself cozying up to a story involving your friend's mysterious encounter with a spectral figure in a grocery store. Or perhaps someone will share a digital folklore tale about a vengeful spirit that steals your Wi-Fi signal every time you forget to feed your houseplants. Thanks, Gary. That's surely a reflective take on our tech-obsessed lives. This resurgence of spooky stories has deep roots in cultural heritage, an art form where generations pass down ghosts that shape our present. Collective fears and eerie encounters unfold in chilling climaxes decade after decade, ensuring you'll never forget your uncle's tale of the creeping old lady living next door. She had eyes that glowed in the night and a penchant for collecting undercooked spaghetti. But what about the unexpected impact of social media on our storytelling? Platforms like TikTok and Instagram have now crafted a virtual haunted house of horrors. You know the type. Viral stories promote a unique flavour of terror wrapped in user-generated content. Thanks to these platforms, terrors are no longer confined to dusk until dawn at campfires. They slip through the electric glow of your device and invade your thoughts in broad daylight. Have you seen that trend where creators reenact hair-raising poltergeist experiences? Sure, it occasionally exaggerates a doll's habit of gliding off a shelf, but the thrill is in the collective fear and imaginative exaggeration that brings people together. And let's not forget how storytelling has morphed into an all-encompassing Halloween experience. Gone are the days when you only shared stories among family and friends. Nowadays, you can walk through immersive local haunt experiences where ghost story reenactors concoct bubbling cauldrons while narrating the dreadful origins of a nearby cemetery. Families flock to haunted houses, eager to participate in tales woven from darkness, while cleverly ducking the dramatic chainsaw-wielding actor around the next corner. One might ponder whether a modern horror movie is worth the heart palpitations when a living, breathing storyteller is waiting to engage with you at the haunted trail. As we dive deeper into this season of frights, never underestimate the power of a ghoulish tale whispered during the enchanting hours of Halloween night. These stories are not just amusing pastimes. They fuse together generations, rekindle old friendships, and most importantly, remind us that no matter how fleeting our fears may be, they're best shared with those we love and frightfully adore. So, whether you're indulging in folklore from your ancestry, or concocting tales so wildly elaborate you'll question the state of your neighbour's gnomes, embrace this storytelling renaissance. The ghost stories you create today may very well be the haunting legends of tomorrow. Happy haunting! Every year as October creeps in, debates reignite over whether Halloween is a cherished tradition or just a fleeting trend. With every new costume and decoration, it brings an eternally fresh breath of life to ancient customs. In this debate, isn't it better to celebrate than to dissect whether pumpkins are truly scary? After all, who doesn't want to throw on a cape and prance around as Dracula while your dog dons a taco costume? It's a wild juxtaposition that accurately represents our modern appreciation for the ridiculous. As the nights grow longer and the air turns crisp, houses transform into Halloween extravaganzas filled with ghosts, goblins, and lights bright enough to rival the 4th of July. But as you walk through these suburban, spooky wonderlands, have you ever stopped to think, what's behind this frenzy? From digital decorations that can make even the most optimistic elf cry, to inflatable spiders creeping across lawns like they've been given a night off from arachnophobia therapy, it's clear this holiday has evolved from its origins. Has Halloween become a creative outlet for adults too? Call it ghostly self-expression, if you will. Take a moment to imagine the average American household leading up to October 31st. It's as though a How to Confuse Your Neighbour's guidebook has been published. Next door, the Johnsons are featuring a graveyard scene so elaborate, it could probably be featured in a horror movie. Meanwhile, your own front yard is adorned with cobwebs and a single poorly carved pumpkin, a clear sign that either commitment issues run deep, or you're just saving time for Netflix and chill, but not in a spooky way. Why bother carving when you can simply buy a few plastic skulls and call it a night? Let's not forget social media either. Halloween became a feast for the eyes with hashtags like Halloween 2023 and Spooktacular Night dominating your feeds. What was once a terrifying ghost story told by the glow of a campfire has transformed into perfectly staged snapshots of costumes that rival Hollywood productions. Look at my kid in an astronaut outfit next to a giant inflatable pumpkin. You may think to yourself, comparing that social media highlight reel to your own middle-of-the-night snack run in a bathrobe with visible bedhead. Times have definitely changed, and you have to wonder, does my lack of a sparkling social media presence confirm I'm the spooky one? And then there's the ever-present debate around cultural appropriation and inclusivity in Halloween costumes. You've got cardboard cutouts of different cultures and beliefs parading next to kids dressed as inappropriately large versions of Taco Bell favourites. It can feel like a carnival of confusion. Shouldn't Halloween be an opportunity to celebrate diversity in a respectful way? Alas, these questions are likely to tumble around in your mind as you dive into the candy bowl, stuffing your face with sugar as though it can erase societal dilemmas. Now, if we take a deeper dive, we can't overlook how Halloween has contributed to our economy. retailers plan for this spooktacular season like it's the Super Bowl. Halloween supply chains are set up just as well as any sports league, complete with promotional materials and candy corn sales that could make a king weep with joy. Who knew buying a piece of fabric and a few plastic fangs could contribute so much to local economies? But, like all good things, commerce has a flip side. Enter the half-price Halloween sales that occur the minute the clock strikes midnight on November 1st. One moment you have candy galore, the next it's like a zombie apocalypse hit the supplier, leaving you with a sad, half-deflated ghost balloon and a promise to yourself to never let this happen again. Until next year. Looking ahead, we're left to ponder what Halloween will evolve into. As technology advances, who knows? Perhaps next year we'll all have holographic ghosts appearing in our backyards, or even spectres streaming from our televisions to interact with us in real time. Virtual reality trick-or-treating. Now that's a trend I could get behind. So whether Halloween remains a cherished tradition or morphs into something anew, one thing is certain. It pulls us together. We mix laughter with fear, joy with superstition, and perhaps that's where its magic truly lies. When we peel back the layers of costumes, candy, and spooky decor, we're left with a celebration that allows us to embrace our quirks and connect with friends, strangers, and the ghosts of holidays past. And in return, as we await the shadows behind the doorbell ring, we can at least be grateful the traditions that spark this annual freaker aren't disappearing anytime soon. Ghostly gatherings, neighbourhood celebrations. Trick-or-treating morphs into neighbourhood parties, complete with haunted houses, ghostly gatherings, and spooky contests. Parading through streets in costumes that spark joy, or intermittent embarrassment, is now a favourite pastime of children and adults alike. Make sure to skip that neighbour who hands out raisins. Yes, it's all fun and games until you end up with a sack full of candy corn and a parental lecture about healthy snacking. Nothing screams Halloween more than the smell of pumpkin spice and faint panic as you sort through candy to market value. Ever gotten a toothbrush in your treat bag? Modern parental threats cleverly disguised as holiday cheer. As you step outside, the air is thick with anticipation, and the faint smell of popcorn and caramel wafting from neighbourhood bonfires. You hear the distant sound of laughter and shrieks, both charming and blood-curdling, melding into a delightful symphony of chaos. It's like a flash mob of munchkins has taken over the streets, little witches on broomsticks, superheroes with capes that could double as safety nets, and a parade of zombies wiggling through the crowd, all on a quest for sugar and perhaps some self-identity in the process. After all, if you can't be who you want to be on Halloween, when can you? And let's not forget the ingenious adults who take their costumes too seriously. Remember that neighbour dressed as a headless horseman, gallivanting around with a pumpkin on his shoulders? Quite the sight, right? But don't ask him about his costume 2 hours in. You might witness what happens when enthusiasm meets the annoying truth that it's sticky under there. Or the mum who insists on putting her entire family in matching costumes, which might be cute until the 5-year-old gets tired and demands to be seen and not just part of a giant taco. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate those haunted houses that have become staples of the season. Not the cheesy ones filled with inflatable ghosts that inadvertently deflate mid-scare. Rather, the ones that employ real thrills, complete with actors lurking in dark corners and sound effects that put horror movies to shame. You step inside, and the air becomes oppressively thick, like the time you tried to budget for groceries and miscalculated everything. You may hear a ghostly whisper, and suddenly you're questioning your life choices. Why did you pay to get scared out of your socks? But there you are, trying to play it cool, while gripping your friend's sleeve and praying that whatever's lurking around the corner is indeed just a person dressed as a zombie and not your poor judgment catching up to you. Meanwhile, parents stroll alongside, navigating their children's gleeful screams with an occasional eye roll, performing a delicate dance between pride and embarrassment. "Oh, look at Timmy! He's a little ghost!" they exclaim. "No, Mom, I'm a demon from the underworld." Ah, the joys of miscommunication. Nothing tops the joy of watching a 5-year-old attempt to procure candy as though he's conducting a negotiation for a hostage exchange. "I'll trade you 2 lollipops for one of those shiny chocolate bars. Come on." During the annual neighbourhood costume contest, residents turn into explorers of creativity. There's always one neighbour who takes the crown every year, the one who produces a jaw-dropping costume that's party-ready, scary, and just a little too stylish for any sane person. While you're just trying to balance comfort and semi-creativity, they turn up looking like they walked off the set of a blockbuster horror film, complete with spooky sound effects. Meanwhile, you're just standing there in a haphazard mummy get-up, trying to convince everyone that you intended for, "Did I just trip over my bandages to be the selling point of your outfit? And as the night draws to an end, what remains?" Leftover candy that mysteriously disappears overnight, probably due to the same crows as stealing socks across the street, but definitely not from your pantry. Ghostly gatherings indeed morph each year, but the laughter, creativity, and the undeniable thrill of Halloween hold their spots securely, tied tighter than that overly ambitious costume your next-door neighbour insisted you help with. So, as you walk home, hear the echo of laughter and marvel at the kaleidoscope of costumes. Don't forget to savour those fleeting moments. After all, where else can you escape entirely into a night of thrills? And remember, every neighbour's Halloween tradition contributes to the ghost stories you'll tell for years to come. Can we talk social media? Halloween has transformed into an influencer's dream, where costumes and decorations become a passport to clicks and likes. Ghost selfies, spooky TikToks, and Instagram stories filled with candy overload are the new way to celebrate your favourite haunting season. Your life may be a horror show, but at least it makes for a good post. Picture this. You wake up on Halloween morning, you've got your phone charged and ready, and suddenly the pressure is on. That early morning cup of coffee suddenly looks like a treat going to waste if you don't get the perfect first sip pick next to your pumpkin spice latte. You reach for your seasonal decor, carefully curated via Pinterest, but hastily recreated with whatever odds and ends are scattered in your craft drawer. Pile in a bit of glitter, a dash of fake spider webs, and voila! The sacred space of your dining room transforms into a horror-inspired centerpiece, just begging for some social media notoriety. Now that the centerpiece is selfie-ready, it's time for the pièce de résistance, the costume. Gone are the days of simple sheet-draped ghost get-ups or worn-out witch hats. Nope. Nowadays, it's all about the trending hashtags, elaborate makeup tutorials, and finding that fine line between totally adorable and I might actually haunt you. Ever tried to recreate a complex look inspired by a character from a Netflix series? Kudos to you, because you now unwittingly resemble a paint-splattered Picasso, while your dog plays the sad, forgotten victim in the background. Once your Halloween ensemble is camera-ready, it's go time. You strut outside not just to spook the neighbours, but to chase digital fame. The neighbours? Forget them. You're there to slay on social media, baby. As you walk the streets, jangling the heavy bags of full-size candy bars you shamelessly bought to elevate your status as the best house on the block, your best friend trains the camera on you as if you were the latest Marvel superhero. Your plastic witch's cauldron filled to the brim with high-calorie goodness is the real star of the show. Snap! The perfect action shot goes live, the likes come pouring in, and suddenly you're a Halloween legend, or at least your mum's proud of you. Not to mention, every time you post, Grandma comments, "What a handsome boy you are," and suddenly, your buzz is unstoppable. But then again, who doesn't love a supportive family member reminding you that even in Halloween costume mode, you're still someone's darling? What about the delightful DIY projects that you spent way too long curating? Ever crafted some bat garlands or nifty pumpkin lanterns with the kids, only to realise half the fun was taking pictures of them pretending to be in a cooking show while covered in paint? Because if it's not on Instagram, did it even happen? Your beautifully staged pictures of your kids wielding tiny knives, no, not that kind, become the envy of all other parents. The piles of glitter are mere artifacts of your creative chaos. They must have a place in the highlight reel. And let's not forget the baking ventures, an unfortunate mix of Pinterest dreams turned into Marco Polo's culinary disasters. Your attempt at ghost-shaped cookies comes out looking more like blobular aliens with a hideous expression that would frighten any small child. But you can bet there's still a tutorial to create a whimsical aesthetic for every cringe-worthy bake. You just shove the results into an airtight container marked Horror Bake Off while snapping an overhead shot for Instagram. #goals, right? As the night comes to a boisterous end, your phone buzzes with a satisfaction that could rival the return of a ghost. You've tagged your friends in ghastly group photos, joined live streams of your friends attempting the latest TikTok dance, dressed as the Grim Reaper, and even shared a reel of that one friend who insists on bringing their cat to the event, resulting in either rave reviews or your social currency turning into, "Oh no, not this again." So, as Halloween draws to a close and the candy runs low, remember to live in the moment, not just for the likes, but for the fun of it all. Post it, share it, laugh about it. Because in the grand pumpkin patch of life, we're all just trying to carve out our little piece of joy, even if we end up looking a tad ridiculous. And as the seasonal decorations languish in the attic, haunted by their faded glory until next year, at least your feed will be stuffed with the memories that made this Halloween spooktacular. Future of Halloween. Innovation from obsession. Who knows where Halloween will go from here? New technologies, trends and tales will continue to evolve the season, making us rethink what spooky and fun can mean. Whatever the future may hold, one thing is for sure. The ghosts and ghouls aren't going anywhere soon, so better stock up on Tootsie Rolls. As the years march on, Halloween morphs and adapts to the whims of a society that increasingly revels in the macabre. With everything from augmented reality haunted houses to AI-generated creepy costumes on the horizon, prepare for October to become a case study of creativity wrapped in cobwebs. Imagine strolling through your neighbourhood not just in person, but through a virtual landscape where your smartphone becomes your digital guide to spotting spectral figures and discovering hidden treasures. Dodging ghosts on a touchscreen is delightfully ironic. The very same ghost you'd run from in real life become pixelated pals on your device. "Hey, look at me! I just saved a ghost from a pie-eating contest!" Technology adds a sprinkle of absurdity that only enhances the joys of Halloween. Who needs real tricks when you have augmented ones? Let's consider costumes. Remember when dressing up as a ghost meant tossing a white sheet over your head, hoping your parents wouldn't trip over it while rushing to the front door? It feels a bit quaint now, doesn't it? Nowadays, costumes are designed with futuristic flair, incorporating 3D printing, LED lights, and motion sensors. Rather than just wearing a costume, you might soon become part of an interactive narrative. With a flick of your wrist, your cloak might actually flutter like a bat's wings. Just watch out for the wayward child trying to score candy. A slap on the wrist could quite literally crack your latest costume creation. And of course, the influence of social media cannot go untouched. After all, some of the most viral Halloween costumes revolve around trends that are borderline absurd. Oh, awesome! You went as a viral meme? How original! The template for Halloween has evolved. Rather than flocking to the local stores for inspiration, people turn to platforms like TikTok and Instagram. One moment you're scrolling through laundry lists of potential costumes, and suddenly there's a flash mob of influencers uniting in their absurdity. Expect duck costumes paired with inflatable unicorns, a sprinkle of capitalist candy, and you've got yourself a winning combination. Talk about innovation from obsession. The internet loves to throw everything in a blender and see what pops out. But let's not forget the spooky haunts, those delightfully creepy attractions that beckon thrill seekers to face their fears. Every year, haunted attractions seem to up the ante, unveiling elaborate setups that make the grim murmur of terror feel like an upscale dinner theatre. The future holds promise for serious innovation. Think pop-up escape rooms or interactive ghost hunts that seamlessly blend real-life scares with tech-driven experiences. Your friends may race ahead to escape a swarm of ghouls, but they're also dodging hyper-realistic holograms that bring Halloween's fantastical creatures to life. Just hope the app doesn't glitch and turn your escape into your last stand against a swarm of animated candy corn. Because nothing screams horror like facing your last Halloween snack. As long as there's creativity buzzing amidst the cobwebs, the spirit of Halloween will endure. The holiday will continually evolve to reflect cultural shifts, driven by innovation and the irresistible urge to push boundaries. It isn't just a time for candy and costumes. It's an opportunity to tap into the playful sense of fear that unites us, allowing us to explore the depths of imagination and impossibility. So when you get ready for Halloween in future years, don't just pull out your usual decorations. Think bigger. Engage those around you in a game of spooky know-how, where you all devise your narratives and reinvent Halloween year after year. From integrating the digital and the real world to embracing the absurd and humorous layers that Halloween offers, prepare yourself for a holiday that could one day make history textbooks marvel at how joyfully weird we all were. Because no matter how much we crave innovation, at its core, Halloween will always be about shared experiences, whether we're braving haunted houses together or gathering around a flickering screen, plotting our next cookie heist while dressed as the Grim Reaper. So let your imagination run wild and carve your own niche into this fabulously odd holiday, even if that means dressing as your favourite type of pasta, just to keep your friends confused. In a world of scary uncertainty, maybe that's the best kind of treat after all.